Welcome to the Gottesdienst crowd, where we foster confessional integrity, liturgical preservation, and preaching that doesn't stink. We believe that the historic liturgy of the divine service is more than mere cobwebs of antiquity, but it is a true treasure of the Church to be dusted off and brought down from her attic to be enjoyed. So let's get dusting.
Welcome back to the Gottesdienst crowd. This is Jason Broughton. Today we have back with us Carl Fabricius. Welcome back, Carl.
Hey, it's good to be back, Jason. Been a long time.
I know. It's because you're so darn busy as a retired person. I don't understand this. But maybe one day I will. So I will try to have empathy for you. But it's good to have you back, and I'm excited to kind of go on the journey through the playground of the Bible with you again. What are we looking at this time?
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Hebrew words for womb and connection to the mercy of God, and the fact that there are three different words. So it also seems to me that should tell you wombs are pretty central to this whole thing. I know I've talked before about the 8 holy wombs in the Bible and how it connects different wombs, but we're going to look more at just how the term is used today. Mm-hmm. Of course, starting in Genesis and then kind of working our way through is my plan here. And you interrupt at any time and try to get me back on course if I wander out there.
I definitely will. All right, so where do you want to begin?
Well, I'm going to start with Rechem. It's only used 26 times, but it's my favorite. And it can also refer to compassion. The 3-letter Hebrew root is tied to that. In fact, some very important language of compassion, because it includes the things like Exodus 34, where you've got God passing by. Exodus 34:6, the Lord passed before Moses and proclaimed, the Lord God, merciful and gracious. And that merciful there, the description of God as the merciful God, and the fact that it's connected to the 3-letter root again, that same Rechem root, I think is very important for understanding the womb as a place of compassion. In today's world, everything's biological. In a Hebrew sense, there's always word pictures associated with it. Mm-hmm. So having something like Rechem be there as a word for womb, and connecting it to the fact that God is this gracious, this merciful one, full of tender mercies is another translation. In fact, it's in plural form in quite a few passages, this idea of being the tender mercies of God. Yeah. It really needs to be important. And it goes into the Deuteronomy 13, verse 17 and 18. You see it where the Lord needs to turn from the fierceness of his anger and show you mercy and have compassion on you and multiply you. Notice the having compassion and multiplying both in one passage there, and that's a frequent kind of image you get when you talk about wombs in the Old Testament. Now, Rechem itself, the word first shows up, the word for womb, at Genesis 20, verse 18, and an interesting use, because there you have the reference to God closes up the wombs of the household of Abimelech because of Sarah. Now, in Genesis 15:4, the word to Abraham is that it'll be one from his own body, English translates, but the term is ma'ah there, another Hebrew word again for womb. And I think the fact that it uses womb there is already pushing us toward realizing Sarah is specifically set apart. It's not just Abraham, but she is bound up in this promise too. She's his wife. It's from her flesh, from her womb, that the promise is going to be fulfilled. And the fact that Genesis 16, of course, is where she goes and has him sleep with Hagar. I think having it at 15:4, the reference already that we aren't going to translate from his own womb, because we realize a womb is a place biologically in a woman, even in the weird world today. And you have to realize that truth in anticipation of then the Genesis 20 account, where God specifically makes sure all the wombs are shut up in the household of Abimelech. Now, later, you have Genesis 29, verse 31, where Leah's womb is open. Do you remember why? That's always an interesting line. God sees that Leah is unloved.
You're right.
And he opens her womb. Now, in view of this whole connection to compassion, God's compassion, his mercy, his tenderness, that he does this, and you have that language there, I think is a nice connection again to remind us the importance of the womb, the importance of it really being a place not only of life, but witnessing God's compassion for us. He sees men here in this world, the men who are under the curse of death, and yet he shows his compassion by continually opening wombs, bringing forth children, life in abundance. And so in Genesis 30 then, God remembers Rachel, who's been waiting, not so patiently, of course, but opens her womb then. And this process goes on.
So how is this related then to the blessing in Genesis 2 or in Genesis 1?
I mean, in Genesis 3, you have the blessing, of course. And Genesis 1 and 2, you're talking about the blessing of be fruitful and multiply.
Yeah.
And certainly we want to remember that then the fruit of the womb is language that we see actually with all three of these terms for womb. You're going to get the phrase fruit of the womb at times because ultimately fruitfulness comes from God's word, even after the flood where he says, be fruitful and multiply again. His desire is to bring forth life, and the womb specifically is the place where life is brought forth. I mean, you think in terms of jumping ahead, but this is me. Jeremiah, that language of Jeremiah 1, remember verse 5, where the language is that he called him forth from the womb. He formed you in the womb, Jeremiah. He made you there. But that's not the only place we see that in the scriptures. There's that kind of language as well in terms of the Psalms, the idea of the womb being so important. I like a little phrase in Judges 5, in that song where Deborah's singing, and you get that language. It's pretty harsh, really, but the judgment on Sisera and his mother is sitting there, and they're counting the spoils. That's why he's not home yet. And there's actually, it says, a womb or two for each, so that they were dividing up the women, the wombs, to bring life. And instead, of course, there's death. He's dead. And it was Jael who brought about that death. And her womb instead will be a place of life. So there's the close connection between they think they're taking spoils, taking wombs, and instead the one with the womb conquers the enemy. It's a nice little interchange. It's one of my favorite little songs anyway. I used to sing it in catechesis class. So,
well, that's raised an interesting point for like our day. So if God's mercy is connected to the opening of his people's wounds or his creation's wombs, what does that say when we want to close our wombs, I mean?
It's really a horrible judgment. I mean, the wicked, I'm trying to think of the verse. It's, for example, the curse of God is that he says he's going to give Ephraim miscarrying wombs and dry breasts, for example. It's just sort of the most, and the wicked, Psalm 58, verses 3 and 4, the wicked are estranged from the womb. They're just apart, away from God, from the womb. So yes, today's idea that somehow children are not to be had and that the womb should not be a place of life. It was bad enough with abortion, but I think it's this whole "we're not going to have children" thing.
Yeah.
Is going even beyond that. It's not just killing our children, but saying we're not even going to have any. I mean, the judgment on Israel, for example, they took their children from the womb and they put them in the fires. And God says in his condemnation of Israel, this is part of the judgment on them.
In a sense, it also seems like we are enclosing our own wombs. We are rejecting how God would have mercy on us, how he would show us compassion.
I think that's fair to say, yes. Because we're saying, instead of seeing, well, the famous verse that children are a blessing from the Lord, or the Psalm 126, 127 language, we instead are saying, no, children are a curse upon us. They bring all these bad things, and we're denying everything that the Creator wants us to realize about the importance of his compassion that centers in life coming forth from the womb.
That is horrible, that we would close ourselves off to the means by which God desires to dole out his grace and mercy.
It's always shocking what men do, but on the other hand, this is a sinful world. I mean, the fact that people are transitioning and giving up wombs, and others are trying to take them. And it's just a strange and perverse way of dealing with things. But you read about Israel and you realize that as perverse as this is, and I'd say even more perverse than some of the things Israel did, it's never shocking that men reach that point in one sense. Yeah. They rebel in every way. But it's really sad to take it further. It's not just that the world is doing it. It's that you see this in, quote unquote, the church in the world. Yeah. And that is where it's really wicked. It was bad enough the Canaanites did things, But when Israel goes, intermarries with them, picks up all their ways, and goes down that path, that is the condemnation. And what we always have to realize, these things were written down in the Old Testament, not just as sort of, things that are interesting stories for morality, for example, or something. It's beyond morality. It's about seeing the whole mercy of God, who God is, how he desires to create life, how he desires to always bring forth life, even though men pursue death on every hand. The whole firstborn from the womb thing, all males that come forth from the womb are God's and are to be redeemed. The importance of that firstborn rule that was to be in there. Everything that opens the womb, God says, is mine in Exodus 34:19. Everything. And all males that open the womb. And to put that mine language on it should be a distinct reminder to all of us. We tend to say, this is my child, which is a safe thing to say. I'm not condemning that language. I'm not being an extremist. But ultimately, we kind of have to remind ourselves, no, this child actually is the Lord's, and he gives this child to us and trusts this child to us. And that's why we're to catechize them, to see that they're trained in the Lord's words. We're to repeat that to them, because he is the one who is the life giver, who brought them forth from the womb. Not just Jeremiah is brought forth from the womb, but rather all life is brought forth from the womb and specifically set apart. Being the Levites, the whole calling of the Levites, they all were a mark of redeeming the rest of Israel. They belonged to him and were set forward to care for Aaron and his sons in the priesthood. So back to something else. Jumping back to this whole womb thing, another mark of compassion, again, back into these stories, is Hannah. Hannah is the one who is being tormented because her womb is closed. And then God opens up her womb and we see Samuel. And she then takes that child who comes forth from her womb and gives that child to be the one who is the servant of the Lord. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And then, of course, God gives her 5 other children. Isn't it 5? All of a sudden, I'm having a doubt in the back of my head, but I believe it's 5.
Well, and she, Hannah, that is, like Sarah, undergoes mocking and derision from the ones who have received.
Yes.
Is there any connection to that? Those who use the mercy of God as a means of, or an occasion to become puffed up and proud instead of showing mercy to others.
Yeah, in that case, it's clearly twisting things around, but you see that kind of battle. Let's face it, we take that back to the whole Leah and Rachel thing. That was a bitterness and sort of holding one above the other, and the children became sort of tools, and then you see the divisions in that family between the different brothers of different mothers, because you end up with 4 different mothers and 4 different divisions, really. So
Hannah's womb is opened and a recipient of God's favor.
Yes. I mean, even the naming of Samuel, the Lord hears, the recognition that he heard her prayer and opened her womb, which is just a lovely thought. Interestingly enough, of course, that whole story unfolds with the sons of Eli and then the sons of Samuel go down the same pathway. It's just, which of course we see even in today's world. What's with
pastors' kids?
Yeah, I know. Pastors' kids end up there too, as well as being very faithful. You have the division always. The sons of David. What a messed up household. Time after time we see, we live in the sinful world, and our children get tangled up in that sinful world. They come forth from the womb. We can give them everything along the way in terms of the necessary things for faith. And yet, the tangling up in the things of the world can't be avoided. And even in some of the greatest households of faith, you still have sad results at times.
Indeed.
Jumping to another thing, can you guess where the 3 terms for womb are used the most? Which book of the Bible? Which book of the Old Testament?
I would assume the Psalms, but... Well,
actually, yeah, probably Psalms, but that's just maybe secondary. I didn't count it officially, but Job.
Okay.
Job mentions the womb again and again. I mean, he even says, you made me in the womb. You fashioned me in the womb. That language comes up. So you have this pattern in Job, which may be one of the oldest books that's always debated. That language comes up because it's patterning what will be true in Jeremiah's case later on. Then Israel is said to be carried from the womb in Isaiah 46, that God has just carried her along. Back to Jeremiah, though. Here he was told he was formed in the womb. You get to Jeremiah 20, verses 17 and 18, and Jeremiah says, why did he come forth from the womb? I mean, as if it's much like Job, who uses that same kind of plea, saying, look at the judgment on me. I've just brought sorrow. And I'm mocked in the world, Jeremiah says. I just see labor, and it is difficult for me. What's the exact words here? Let me get them. He says, because he did not kill me from the womb, that my mother might have been my grave, and her womb always enlarged with me. He's looking at his life and thinking, look what I have to do. All I do is preach destruction and judgment, and everybody mocks me and tells me, no, there's peace, and he has the false prophets to contend with and everything. So it is interesting. I'd never really made that connection before between Jeremiah 1 and 20, but I think it is an interesting one at that. Other language in terms of God's mercy, I like the Hosea 2 language, where he betroths himself in loving kindness and mercy. There's that rakam word. So marriage gets tangled up with it, and I like that coming up there. But let's move on and say a little bit about the most common word for womb, and that's beten. Shows up first in Genesis chapter 25, verses 23 and 24, where you've got the Lord speaks and says, this is to Rebekah, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. And you know how the rest of it goes. But again, the womb, the struggle already going inside that womb. Which is, people may say when a woman is carrying twins, there's that twisting and turning in there. But here you get it even more direct, saying, hey, 2 nations are in there. You get the struggle, and it's in the womb. That place of God's mercy where he brings life forth is also, in the world of the curse, there's also the struggle already even there. I mean, everybody says, of course, children are so innocent. Well, maybe not in view of this verse. In fact, I shouldn't say maybe not. Definitely not. But even in the womb, there was a struggling, and the 2 brothers going at each other. And that, of course, was a story of their life, and even of later on, the question of whether Edom will support his brother Israel, and the things that are in the episodes all the way through, and even on the judgment then that is rendered in the prophets against Edom. It starts right there when the struggle was in the womb and unfolds from there. The famous statement of Jacob later, he gets angry with Rachel. This is a great line. Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? There's that fruit of the womb language that I mentioned earlier. I mean, he's recognizing the direct connection. Do what he wants to do, it won't matter. God is the one who brings forth the real fruit of the womb. His word, to be fruitful and multiply, is carried out then. I mean, even when people say, it's always kind of that, in our world, people use an accident at times for having children. No. There is no accident.
Right.
Of course, we could go into that whole question of people wanting to control the womb completely, and just how demonic that really is, being opposed to the place of God's compassion, his place of life, where he brings forth and multiplies.
In that Genesis passage that you just mentioned, there are 2 words in the Septuagint for translating womb. Do they use the same word in Hebrew? I don't have the Hebrew in front of me.
Let me just open that one right here. Trying to remember. I'm thinking it's maybe 2 words just like that. So let's look at 25, 23.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Betem and Ma'ad.
Yeah, it is Ma. In the second one, the end of 24. Well, it comes back to, so it goes Betem. Ma'ah is the 2 people shall be separated from your body, and So that's how the New King James does it. But what you've got is ma'ah there, and that is another word for womb. That is something that happens often too. You get more than one of these words because they are linked together. I mean, there's actually, in Isaiah 49, you end up with all three of them in the context as the womb and the connection to sending the anointed one. It comes out three different words there. So you take the three words that are used throughout the Old Testament, bring them all together in the one who will come as the Messiah from the womb of the Blessed Virgin, of course, and the fulfillment of everything. So here, translators are not going to say, two nations are in your womb, two people shall be separated from your womb, even though that's probably a better way to say it. In verse 24, you go back to the Betan word. So when her days are fulfilled, there were twins in her womb. But you've piled up the references to the womb using two different words, I realize. But at the same time, there's sort of heightening and emphasizing that location is what IDEC would say just in that repetition and the using of two of those words. And when you pile all three in a passage, that's just really nice.
Yeah, and in the Septuagint, it goes from gastri, the first reference in 23, and then koilias in the second reference, and then in 24, it goes back to koilia.
Yeah.
And from what I can tell, there are three words in Greek, at least from the Septuagint, that translate the words that you are talking about, womb, belly, and one is matron.
Oh, yeah, I did look that up.
And
sorry,
then gastri,
slipped my mind.
And then koilias. But yeah, I'm not sure, what the kind of semantical freight those words carry from each of those words, if they are translated for only particular things, only if they use koilias always for betan, or matron always for the first word that you gave us.
Yeah,
Rechem.
I just did a preliminary look. I'm not going to put all my marbles on this, but if I remember right, they aren't consistent about that.
Yeah, probably not. Okay. But do you know in the New Testament what, how this, are they using all these same three Greek words in the New Testament?
Well, I know koilia. I always think of koilias in terms of the Lazarus, the rich man and Lazarus account.
Yeah.
I mean, that's especially since I was doing this about the womb, and it really could be translated from the womb of, from your own womb, Abraham. And then to see that in terms of being in that account, this always is sort of being in the inmost being, but the place of life, the place where faith is to be nourished and everything. I mean, because even in the womb, the words of God are to be there. So that's the one that sticks out in my head. I'm not going to.
Well, they use the same thing from when Jesus is saying that he's going to give the sign of Jonah in the belly of the earth. That's koilia. Well, and then also in John's gospel, when he's talking about the water and the blood coming from his side, that's also koilia. And that might go back to, what is it, Ezekiel, that has the river flowing from the koilia of the temple, if you're looking at the Septuagint. So it's kind of used for side or belly. I mean, it's not always consistently used for womb, but if it carries that freight of the womb, the place of life and the place of God's mercy, I mean, that would help us connect all of those passages to, from the Old Testament, where God's mercy is being shown in the opening of wombs, and now still in the opening of the womb, or the side, as it were, at the crucifixion. All of those things are being kind of brought together with the overlapping of those terms, such that we see God's mercy is always shown in the giving of new life. And that's precisely what we get at the crucifixion and resurrection, right? Where he comes out of the belly of the womb, the water and the blood come out of his womb, or the belly of the earth, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. It just provides that.
Well, I like it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess, we tend to think that there are not a lot of references to the resurrection in the Old Testament. But if you're connecting all of these New Testament usages of womb or side to the things that are going on in the Old Testament, now you have a different understanding. Yeah, it was always about life. It was always about new life.
Well, in the womb, because it's a place where death also occurs, and where sometimes it's shut up, but it can be opened again. That whole shut up the womb, open the womb, sort of like the tomb is opened up. And then that whole thing, the question of the woman who may have committed adultery and the judgment. Mm-hmm. When you go to that Numbers 5 passage, betten is used there. Now, the translations do something like, when the Lord makes your thigh rot and your belly swell. I don't know why they stay away from using the term womb there, because I think that's much more appropriate, that the womb would swell up. The judgment then goes right to the place where life is supposed to be, and you've committed adultery, you've departed and gone down that road. So the water...
But we don't... Do you think it's because outwardly we see it as the belly?
Well, yeah, I know what, from an English standpoint, I get it.
Yeah.
I like the underlying word there, and sometimes I just, me, I like just to be literal at times, simply because I think it helps us make better connections. Your womb is going to swell up. The curse goes into your stomach and makes your womb swell and your thigh rot. Mm-hmm. And the woman has to say, amen, so be it. I mean, that's a pretty, when you think of what's happening there with the womb and the judgment that's going down, and the curse that she has to bear. And again, that gets repeated in verse 27 again about her womb will swell, her thigh will rot. Now, all of a sudden I'm going to go blank here, but in the prophets, that there's language of the judgment that's coming on Israel. And it says they've become like one whose womb is swelling and whose thigh is rotting. It's that language that ties it back to the whole question of adultery and the judgment of adultery. It doesn't mention adultery in that prophetic language there. And it's somewhere in my notes here. And like I said, I had a computer problem today, so it's not as readily available as I wish it was. Yeah. But
I mean, so would you then connect, Ezekiel speaks of, the temple having a womb, a side. And he, throughout the scriptures, you have the understanding that there is a belly of the earth. So when God cuts the people off from the temple or from the land of promise, this is also a closing of the womb.
Yeah. Because
being cut off from life.
Remember, part of entering the promised land, he promises them that if they are faithful to his words, keep all his statutes and commandments, that in fact, the fruit of the womb will multiply. Mm-hmm. There will be just abundance of life. He will love you and bless you. Deuteronomy 7, also in 28. He will love you and bless you and multiply you. He will also bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your land. Tying all these things together. Again in chapter 28, blessed shall be the fruit of your womb. So the increase that he desires to give when his people are faithful. He shuts all that off.
My question is, would they have seen and understood not just that they lack God's blessing and mercy because they're not having children or their land is desolate, but they've actually been cut off from the womb of God, made present in the cultus of the temple, that they no longer have access to his mercy and that womb.
The
So
answer
when they
is
hear
they should.
Yeah, they should, right?
But what happens, and well, the prophetic judgment, you become so stubborn. You go back again and again. The language of Nehemiah when they return to the land in Nehemiah 9, he piles up these references to them, their stubbornness, the way they consider, they had to be delivered into the hands of their enemies. And then, of course, they cry out, he hears, and according to his abundant mercies, he gives them deliverers. And yet what happens? And they go back and did evil again before God. So they keep repeating this. And then you reach verse 30 in chapter 9. He says, yet for many years you had patience with them and testified against them by your spirit in your prophets, yet they would not listen.
Right.
So all these mercies of God, and the fact that really by the way, there is a weird reference where the term for this beton term describes the top of the pillars and the convex shape. It's in the temple, when they build the temple. It's actually described by the term beton, the womb term. Now, they translate that as a convex shape or something like that.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that you wound that, since we're on this track, and I like this track, that you get a womb reference in regard to the construction of the temple and the design of the temple.
So in the very architecture
is the place
of
of
it,
life, and you get this whole language of crying out, would really make that nice connection. Now, do they see it? Back to that question. No.
How do they not, like with the actual terms being used, how do they not see it? Or at least, I mean, in some ways, you would think that seeing it and rejecting it, then the judgment is greater.
Well, I mean, think of people you've catechized.
Okay.
And people that you thought,
fair,
boy, they've really got the blick, they're faithful, and then all of a sudden they go off and it's like they never heard a word you said. So how do we get there? How'd they get there? They just wandered off after their own desires. I mean, the intermarriage with all the pagans, when they were warned not to intermarry. Why were they warned not to intermarry? Because that was how the faith got destroyed.
Yeah.
It's always that question, will you catechize these people from the outside? And will they become Christians? And people like to say, oh, yes. But of course, if they don't before they get married, then that family has that, when children come, if they come, that's always that grain of sand sort of wearing away and doing all the things that happen. And then, I've had people I catechized that I thought might become pastors who are married, gay marriage now. So it's a sad world.
Yeah.
And it was that way with Israel, but that's a warning to us. We need to actually pursue these matters and speak about these matters one with another and remind ourselves that, yes, there is a womb in the church. The font is the womb where we are born. We come forth from that. They, of course, had the offerings that were offered up at the birth of the firstborn. And male and female both, you had to have the cleansing of the woman. And all that was, of course, to remind them and connect back to that womb imagery that life comes forth from a womb. And we in the church have that womb in the font. And
do we ever see, and I'm not recalling this from memory, but do we ever see, Moses's refuge is called an ark. Obviously, the ark is called an ark. Is there ever is there ever a description of those things as being taken out of the belly of the ark or the womb of the ark? Nothing pops out, but
I don't believe so. I would,
I wish they did, because that would be kind of cool.
in looking at all these passages, nothing was connected to the ark. But
Okay.
yes, that would be kind of fun. Oh, we'll just write another chapter.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Shouldn't joke around. Some people will get.
Yeah, I get it. Yes. So, so more on Beton that you found.
Well, Beton and Ma'ah both show up in Psalm 22, which I like, because of course that is such an important psalm.
Yeah.
Where you have the prayer, "You are he who took me out of the womb. You made me trust while on my mother's breast. I was cast upon you from the womb," it says from birth. "From my mother's womb you have been my God. Be not far from me, for trouble is near, for there is none to help." So you've got in the space of Psalm 22, verses 10, or 9 and 10, I guess it is. Yeah, 9 and 10. You get the piling up of references to the womb. And the fact that Christ was drawn out of the womb, and David was, each one of us is, and the trust there that's associated with it at that point, to trust in the one who brought us forth from our mother's womb, and because you come forth from the womb, you're mine, and of course the confession of verse 10, "From my mother's womb you have been my God."
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a nice psalm to work in there and to think about the importance of womb. Even as he cries out at the beginning, my God, at the same time, throughout the psalm, you're getting this return to, here's the one I can trust in. Much as the Jeremiah language, yes, he gets kind of like, why was I brought out of the womb? You get the language of Job, that he came forth from the womb and it became a dark day. But at the same time, the term Beton and Ma'ah both show up, I believe, in Job 19, which of course is right before the language about the resurrection. I think it's about verse 19, verse 20 or something, somewhere around there. You have that reference where the womb comes up, and then you have the reference to being buried, and he's going to come out of that burial plot. He'll be brought forth alive again. In my flesh I shall see God. So you get these interesting connections to the messianic, line.
And in Psalm 22 and the Septuagint, all three of those Greek nouns are used. Gastros,
in the
metros, and koilios.
Yeah. Well, that's nice too.
Yeah.
You pile up the.
So they are somewhat interchangeable then.
Yes. I haven't told. You do wonder how you get so many words for womb. I mean, in English, we tend to simplify, I mean, we don't have all these different things. But in the one, you can have the compassion connection, but really all of them go to the idea of the place of life. Yes, it can be called belly, and it can be called my inmost place, and in some translations, they use the term heart at times. In one passage, they translate my soul, instead of my womb, my womb. In that case, I think they're probably right to go down that path, but it's interesting that in the background, you've got this term for womb in the crying out before God. And I mentioned Isaiah 49.
Do you think that's related at all to, we've got a couple of terms for mercy in the New Testament, elelos, and then, splagnidzomai. And, the splagnidzomai is the one you feel in your belly. Is there any relationship there? Or splankna or something like that?
I'd have to think about it.
Yeah.
You got me. See, I trick you once in a while. Now you're tricking me.
Yeah, you're always tricking me. how should we understand Jesus' statement about the sign of Jonah in light of all of this womb talk?
And you mentioned that earlier, and I was going to get back to it, and then I got sidelined again. But you know that Jonah passage is, in fact, where the womb language comes up.
Yeah.
In Jonah 1:17, is it? Just a minute. Let me get my...
Yeah, 1:17.
Of course, it's not going to happen as easy as I want it to happen, because that would just be too convenient. That's because it's here. Okay. Jonah 1:17 through 2:3. There's that womb language there as well. So that goes back to the whole imagery of the grave, and because Jonah is in the womb of the fish, belly. The translation is acceptable to say belly, but the language is there. And Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the fish's belly, womb. I cried to the Lord because of my affliction, and he answered me. Out of the womb of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. So it piles up that language, and the place that is the place of death, which is closed for us, gets opened up, and you have a place of life. The connection to Ecclesiastes, or no, Proverbs. I will get it here. There are 4 things that cannot be denied, and the barren womb is one of those 4. But the grave is there too. Is it Proverbs 30?
Yeah, it's
late. What I want?
29 or 30.
Yeah, it's right in there. So that, you get another one of those connections between grave and womb. But there, of course, the barren womb. Interesting, fire is also in that. Things that can't be denied. Never say enough. That's what it is.
Yeah. Proverbs 30 has all of those. There are 2 things there.
I do like the fact that womb is very important in the story of Samson, because that the whole strongman sequence there and the connection to Jesus in the New Testament, a Nazarite to God from the womb, and then he reveals that from my mother's womb in 16, which gets the judgment on him. And that goes back again to talking about the connections to Christ, who is faithful and does not turn aside from his work. There's many other things. There's a whole bunch of other verses, but we've kind of gone down this road and covered most of the themes, I think.
Yeah.
Along the way. I do want to, I mentioned it
what
earlier.
About Elizabeth and Mary at the visitation?
Oh, do you have that term right there in front of you? I don't have my New Testament in front of me.
Well, I'll have to look it up here.
I'm wondering if it's what it uses for the term of where John is.
Well, you have Elizabeth saying, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb."
Yeah, what term is the word for?
So that's 42 and 44 in Luke 1. In 42, it is koilios, and in 44, koilia again.
Okay, so they were consistent about the term there.
But that tells you that it's not just the fruit that which has come out is life, but the very place is a place of life.
Right. Well, back to that whole, the 2 brothers in the womb.
Yeah.
Struggling. I mean, it is the place of life. And not only, it's not a place isolated from God either. Because after all, the word reaches into the womb. He forms you in the womb. He shapes you in the womb. All this is an ongoing reality because of his original words, be fruitful and multiply. So then when it comes time for his own son to come, and even the final prophet John, the interaction with the womb is sort of right there in the center of it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you already see that in Isaiah 49 that I mentioned earlier, where the language of the coming of the Anointed One, he's called me from the womb, from the matrix of my mother, he has made mention of my name.
Yeah. So would we connect this then to even Jesus' own statement when he's interacting with the Sadducees about the resurrection, and he says, God is the God of the living because he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that God's mercy and his bestowal of life is the sign of the resurrection. So all of these connections are also resurrection connections.
Well, certainly.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing, let's just think of the famous story of David. His first son dies, and then God mercifully does what? He opens up the womb of Bathsheba.
Yeah.
I mean, so you see death come, but of course, then David confesses, I will go to see him.
Yeah.
And then God opens the womb of Bathsheba. Death and life, just so the resurrection language so tied in with the language of womb. But then again, let's face it, all these things are tied together. The scriptures are not just some sort of academic piece. I mean, we have not been treating this really as an academic exercise today.
Right.
They are this place of language that shapes and desires to form life in us. And so the language itself is always full of imagery connected to the work of Christ, his death, his resurrection being, of course, the center of those works. But his incarnation, his coming in the flesh, of course, in the womb of the Virgin. All these things are tied together. It's not just some, academic pursuit. When I always say, when I left seminary, I had no clue what I was doing with the Bible. I just was totally ignorant because I thought it was like if you worked hard enough, suddenly there'd be sort of this magic thing appeared that you'd have some story that you could tell or something. Instead of seeing this is all really about Jesus, I was still groping and grasping and not seeing really what had to happen. It was reading more sermons of Luther and sermons of the fathers that taught me these things. I think in some ways, those who are in your generation and after got a little bit better exposure to some of those ideas than we did. And I give thanks to God for that. I just hate the fact I have to admit how stupid I was when I left seminary.
Well, look, the guys coming out after me are far more informed on things that were blind spots when I was coming out. So, I mean, in some ways, that's hopeful, right? That they're not rejecting what necessarily came before, but they're building upon it and exposing further blind spots that we ourselves had.
And that's what the church always has to be doing.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That whole imagery of standing on the shoulders of those who've gone before.
Right. And then, it seems like the key is for we who have gone before not to get envious and, become wrathful about, what the new guys see that we didn't see, but actually be grateful for it.
Yeah, as long as I can still think, I should say, and pay attention.
Yeah,
I got a few years left in me.
Well, I think you have more than a few, but that all depends on your schedule.
Yeah. So, one last word. I tried to say this before, but you should take a look at Isaiah 49, just because I love the language in that chapter and 4 or 5 different uses, maybe 6, where womb comes up, or even racham, to have compassion. Mm-hmm. Can a woman forget her nursing child and not have compassion on the son of her womb? Now, all that comes after the description of the Lord, who formed me from the womb to be his servant. The servant, of course, being the servant, the coming of Christ. And it's a nice chapter where womb takes on such an important part of the discussion there. So, but that's enough.
Yeah, and just quickly perusing the Septuagint on this, I'm only seeing koilia, but I'm reading it fast, so don't hold me to that.
I won't. After all, I didn't get into that even today, like I sometimes do. I just ran out of time.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think that's the fun part, seeing how it's translated into Greek. So you have all the freight of what the Hebrew language has, and then how do they translate in Greek, and where does that pop up in the New Testament, and how does that inform our understanding of what's being spoken about? So we're not relying solely on, say, how did Aristotle use this, or how did various ancient Greeks use this word, but that it carries some of the freight from that Old Testament usage.
I think that's always important.
Yeah.
And that, as I've said before, I like to give Steve Briel credit. Before he had a little talk with me in the library when I was fourth year, and he was there for some grad work, and he was talking to me about it. He said, use that Septuagint and realize its strength and weaknesses both, but it can help you sometimes figure out the back, sort of the back story on some of the Hebrew. I mean, some of that New Testament stuff. So,
well, thank you for your time, for looking into this, and looking forward to what other themes you'd like to take a look at, what other words you want to explore, and how that broadens our understanding of God's activity among us, in particular through his Son.
Well, you're welcome. Always love doing it.
All right.
Hopefully,
well, until next time.
Do more.
Yeah. Until next time. Take care of yourself and don't work too hard.
Okay. Will do.